Hey everyone, this is Charles Hoskinson broadcasting live from warm, sunny Colorado. Always warm, always sunny, sometimes Colorado. Today is November 23rd, 2021. I got a Bob Ross right here. See, he's got his little paint easel and he's got a little brush. He can beat the devil out of it. Someone gave this to me when I was over in Tennessee. Went there briefly for a family related issue. Anyway, the point of this video is just talk about a news item that hit me I don't know, like 10, 15 minutes ago. I just noticed that there's been some limitation of ADA and Tron liquidity at a mid-size exchange called eToro. And it's a developing story. I had no idea that anything was coming this way. And the reason being is that IO does not handle liquidity and exchange listing for cryptocurrencies. That's done by the Cardano Foundation, and it's important people direct queries to them. But it's important to talk about, in general, the regulatory reality that cryptocurrencies are facing and the consequences as a systemic lack of clarity is having on the industry. So first off, there are no liquidity problems. You gain some, you lose some. For example, Bitstamp just announced that they're listing ADA, and it's a much larger exchange by volume than eToro is for cryptocurrencies, especially in these trading pairs. So some enter, some leave. But in general, right now, there is no global regulatory standard on how to treat cryptocurrencies. For example, the most stringent and strict regulatory structure for cryptocurrencies at the moment, most comprehensive, is probably the nation of Japan. And that's regulated by an entity called the FSA. And there you have to go through an exhaustive process. And the foundation, working with the FSA, went through, I think, 3 different applications and over 500,000 pages of due diligence over a multi-year process to get ADA whitelisted in Japan. And now it's trading there, and more exchanges are taking it up, and liquidity is improving that area. Coinbase was also a very difficult process, from my understanding, to go through, and a lot of oversight there. And there are, of course, active conversations with other US liquidity providers. That said, it's not really clear what is what. For example, in the United States, there's currently a lawsuit against XRP where the US government is asserting that XRP is a security. In Japan, it's being treated as a currency, and it's whitelisted. And there's a lot of commercial activity of XRP in Japan. SBI and others are big boosters in that ecosystem. So despite the fact that liquidity is extremely limited in the US, Ripple is still in the top 10, has a lot of trading. So the best you can do in these things is navigate this on a case-by-case basis, on an exchange-by-exchange basis. I would hope that the foundation publishes a coherent document explaining how they go about this process and what they do. We work with them on a technical basis. So when there are technical questions about Cardano, when there are things that need to be done, like the Rosetta interfaces or the GraphQL interfaces or the deprecated REST APIs, we do that. We certainly answer a lot of questions from exchanges. And for certain large exchanges, we actually permit them access to our internal developer Slack so they can directly interact with developers when they have requests like UTXO fragmentation concerns or other such things. On our side, we had no indication of this from eToro, and it's rather unfortunate that nothing was sent our way, because we at least could have better understood their reasons. And we'll, of course, reach out on our side to better understand reasons, but it's primarily the foundation's responsibility here. It has no meaningful impact on the liquidity of ADA. There's billions of dollars of turnaround every day, or any other factor. It was a relatively small trading market. But this is just the nature of the game. Liquidity comes and goes. Some people like it. Some people don't, because they don't get enough volume or customer interest. And then obviously everybody has different regulatory thresholds. If you're a European entity with principally European customers, you usually limit your US exposure because the cost of US exposure is extremely high. If you're a US native company under US regulation, you're already paying that. It's much easier to comply with those types of things. And some people make these decisions on a case by case basis. Kraken, for example, used to be in Japan. They're not anymore, but now they're in the US. They're actually becoming a bank in the United States, or a speedy bank. The only way we're going to solve this as an industry is through regulatory clarity. So, as mentioned, there are two bills that are coming, the little bill and the big bill in the United States, which will serve as a reference point for the rest of the world. And the little bill is going to try to undo the damage that was done by the infrastructure bill, which is quite significant. The big bill is going to try to, for the first time ever in the history of our industry, provide regulatory clarity on everything from ICOs to STOs to stake pools to asset definitions and apply some functional regulatory standards. And my understanding of the text is it's going to attempt to create an SRO for cryptocurrencies in the United States, similar to FINRA, for example, the largest financial SRO in the world. So that and only that is going to resolve the situation, not litigation, not regulatory enforcement that's somehow sporadic, not administrative changes where every time we go from one to the other, it seems to have radically different viewpoints on how things are going to run, and not regulatory arbitrage where nation states compete against each other by having polar opposite regulation where some it's illegal and others it's not only accepted, it's encouraged and endorsed by the government. For example, El Salvador has legitimized Bitcoin to the extent that it's the national currency of the country, whereas places like India, it's still unclear if crypto is even legal or not. Burundi, crypto is currently illegal. So these are examples of just the wide spectrum and array of things. And that's the reality when you live in a global marketplace and with global products, they're treated very differently. Data, for example, if you're in Europe, you're under GDPR. If you're in Zambia, you're not. So this is just an example, and so you have to have different policies and different things. So my hope is the foundation will provide some clarity on this, or at the very least explain how they work with exchanges and what this looks like in that process. And from our side, we're of course going to look a little bit into what exactly the reasons were. There's currently nothing we've received, no regulatory event, no subpoenas, no nothing from any regulatory agency, no threats of lawsuits, none of these things. And that's why we're so blindsided by it, because actually the trend has been over the last 6 months a significant increase in the amount of liquidity of Cardano. Exchange after exchange and DEXs are listing ADA on a pretty regular cadence. And Bitstamp was a deeply personal one for me because outside of Mt. Gox, it was the main exchange that I used way back in the day when I was trading Bitcoin. And so it was really nice to actually see it finally get there. We tried when we were at Ethereum really hard to discuss Ethereum liquidity there, and they were kind of holdouts. They didn't like altcoins too much back in the day, but it's really amazing to see them open that up. And again, there's no issues on our side, no lingering things or other things like that. It's a complete surprise, but it doesn't surprise me from the perspective of these things happen. um, Everybody has a different compliance desk. Everybody has a different regulatory tolerance. Everybody has a different customer base. And sometimes the cost of supporting something is higher than the profit that you make for it. So you just kind of de-risk by removing people from certain areas or certain sets up. But we'll find out more, of course, as time materializes. And it again is important to understand that the foundation does have a role. They do have a budget. They do have people. My understanding is they're going to hire and staff up to almost 100 people this year, this upcoming year in 2022. And a $25 million budget is what they told me. And big chunk of that budget is regulatory outreach, liquidity, and so forth. So I really await to see them talking about these types of things and what the overall strategy is in 2022 and how they're going to go and promote more liquidity and so forth. But that's not our concern at IO. We don't handle these things. We do the development, the software. We think a lot about the technology, and our relationship as exchanges is strictly technical from that viewpoint. So it gets frustrating because at times we don't get answers. In fact, we find things out when you guys find things out. But I figured I'd just make a quick video because unfortunately, as I've mentioned in my prior videos, we have noticed again and again and again and again and again fear, uncertainty, and disinformation. And people take something and they try to extrapolate something else from it for the purposes of damaging the price of ADA or boosting their own token or ecosystem. So we now live in a situation where immediately when news is seen, we have to immediately make a video or a response to it, or else it cascades and there are days worth of damage. We saw this, for example, with the concurrency, nothing burger, that some very dishonest people in the crypto media and in the uh, blogging and podcasting elite tried to push through, saying that Cardano could only do one transaction per block. Not only is this a complete lie, it's a total misunderstanding of how the extended UTXO model works. Unfortunately, because it took time to write content, that narrative set in certain circles. And now, if you actually go to an Ethereum developer conference, there's at least one person there who believes that, who's a developer, because the news percolated. I even had musicians private messaging me over Twitter saying, "Is this true, this concurrency thing? I heard something in LA, or I heard something here." It's just crazy how much that propagated and widespread. So I fully expect to see a bunch of lies and misinformation and other things, and podcasters and YouTubers speculating. Um, it's not a trend of anything significant. It just seems an adjustment in the risk controls and policy of a particular European entity, and liquidity got clipped there for US participants. However, another exchange, which is larger, right at the same time, Bitstamp, listed ADA. It's under the same regulatory structure as the others, and they have US customers. So they seem to think there's no problem at all. And then eToro's held ADA for a while. The other one had to do the assessment today, right here, right now, of whether that made sense or not. So that's a much better indication of the current reality. And ADA has more liquidity than almost every cryptocurrency in the space. And again, there's a custodial entity from the perspective of liquidity management, and that's the foundation. They wake up every day and talk to exchanges on a regular basis and maintain these relationships. I meet weekly with the foundation. Usually every Monday, I talk to Fred. We talk about a variety of different things, and I'll certainly be asking him this upcoming Monday about it. And I hope they're a bit more proactive in their communication, especially when they know these things. Although it looks like they may have not been told this either. And sometimes people do that. They don't tell you much. So that's all I have for you there, and I hope this resolves some of the misinformation. So there are no issues on our side. We've never received any regulatory summons or subpoena or any of these things. Everything's fine. Cardano's fine. Liquidity is improving. Don't allow people to spread fear, uncertainty, and disinformation. It's just an example of thousands of independent businesses making decisions for their businesses. And some of those decisions are great for Cardano, and some of those decisions aren't. So, you know, Bitstamp listing was great for us, and it increases liquidity. eToro restricting U.S. participants, not so much. And that's just the every given week. And that's just how these things work. And that's why we keep saying pay attention to the macro, not the micro, because there's always a lot of background stuff. However, there's always the ability for people to be held accountable and be better. And it's become clear to me that perhaps there's a better way of communicating strategies and processes. And that can be a KPI for 2022 for the foundation to pursue. So until next time, have a nice day. I'm going to get some lunch. And remember, there are no mistakes, just happy accidents. Cheers, everyone.